Hey friends, you might know that with monitoring as code and the Checkly CLI, you can test and deploy your entire monitoring setup right from the command line. And we have some news. You can now record and access all your test results by adding a new command line flag to the Checkly test command. So say hello to test sessions. I have a quick Checkly CLI example project over here that defines the Checkly package as a dependency and includes a Checkly config file at the root of the project. The Checkly config is pretty much like the base configuration for your Checkly monitoring, so you can give your project a name and you can define default values for all your Checkly checks. So you see that I'm defining a runtime here, a default frequency, and that I want to run the checks of this project in these two locations. When I now go to the checks directory, I'm defining an API check and browser check using the Checkly constructs, and I define a new API check that tests the runtimes endpoint for a proper 200 status code, and a new browser check that leverages Playwright to navigate to checklyhq.com to check for proper status code and to check that this page has a particular title. I already deployed these two in code-defined checks via npx checkly deploy, and when I now head over to the Checkly dashboard, we have these two checks running on a schedule, so every 10 minutes, every 30 minutes, and Checkly takes care of looking out for you and checking that all your defined checks are running properly and that you don't have any problems in production. So we have here the browser check, we have the API check, and this is all good to go. So let's say that you now want to deploy some changes to your infrastructure and you want to update your monitoring setup with it. What you always can do is you can go to your command line and you can do npx checkly test. What happens now is that the Checkly CLI parses your project and it runs these two checks in our infrastructure for you so that you can test your preview deployments and you can make sure that once everything is green and everything is running, that you deploy your infrastructure or code changes with your monitoring. And what we now just added is that we can now persist and record your monitoring results for you. So let me show you how this works. When I go to this check file over here that defines this API and browser check, let's intentionally break it. And I'm now expecting here that I will receive a 300 status code, which will fail in a moment. And what I now can do is I can run npx checkly test again. So this now obviously will fail, and we have all the debug information here right in my terminal. But wouldn't it be cool if we could persist and access this result online? What you now can do is you can pass the record flag to the Checkly test command. So when we now run these two checks, you will see that we now have handy URLs that give us detailed test session summaries. So when we open this, we end up in Checkly, and we now will find all the information of why this API check failed in this case, and we can debug this. And this is particularly useful when you run Checkly tests in your CI/CD pipeline. You probably don't want to parse logs, you want to have a nice UI and figure out why things broke in your preview deployment. When you head over to the test session overview, you see that here are all my test sessions recorded for me. So we have one 9 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago, here's the recent one. And when we have a detailed look, you can access all your checks information. You can see from where they were running, what the Checkly location was, and some Git information to find out, hey, what code was used to run these checks. We persist all the information of this particular check for you. So when we here have a look at the Playwright check, you see that we can access the trace file. So in case this would have failed, we would have all the information of this test run so that we can have a look at what is going on. So I already mentioned that you might want to do this in your CI/CD pipeline. When you want to learn more, go to the Checkly documentation. So first of all, you can go to the docs testing page, and it shows you how you can set things up and how you can define all this meta information that I just showed you. And then if you want to adopt CI/CD, we have guides for GitHub Actions, GitLab, and Jenkins if you want to learn more. So when we have a look at the GitHub Actions flow, we have a Checkly YAML example over here, and there's one addition to the test command that will come in handy here. So when you have a look at this GitHub action, you see that there's also a reporter flag that you can use. So when we now go here and we say reporter GitHub, you will find that this will now create a file for you that is a nice little summary of all the things that were happening in your Checkly test runs. So we see here now, here we have the markdown summary of this particular check run. So let me show you an example on how we use this at Checkly to monitor our stuff with Checkly. So here we have a pull request from my colleague Pilar. And as you see, we run Checkly end-to-end tests, and we'll now have a look and go to the summary. We can see that this preview deployment ran these checks, and if I want to access the full results of these, I can click over here, and I have to change the project here first. I have too many Checkly projects, but now I can see what tests were run in this particular preview deploy and what Checkly test did. Everything is here recorded in our test session section, so you can really keep track of all your test sessions before you deploy your monitoring setup. And this is the new test sessions feature. So with test sessions, you can now, first of all, test your future monitoring setup right from the command line, but you can also record all the results. And if something fails in CI/CD or on your local machine, we persist all the check results for you. If you have any feedback or just want to chat with me and the Checkly team, head on over to checklyhq.com/Slack. I promise you, we're a lovely bunch, and I will talk to you very, very soon again.